Welcome, listener, to another gentle journey through history. Tonight, we take a slow walk back through the cobbled roads and candlelit corners of the medieval world, a time full of mystery, quiet customs, and curious beliefs. As the rain taps gently outside your window and the world fades into a hush, we'll explore one of the most misunderstood and often feared creatures of the past, the humble house cat. This is the story of why medieval people thought cats were evil. Get comfortable, let your breathing slow. There's no rush. This is your time to unwind. Let the sounds of the past flow through your imagination as we begin. Before we understand the fears of the medieval mind, we must first visit the older world, the ancient lands where cats were not feared, but worshipped. In ancient Egypt, cats were beloved and sacred. They walked freely among temples, sat beside scribes, and hunted vermin from grain stores. The goddess Bastet, with the head of a lioness or domestic cat, was worshipped as a protector of home and family. Egyptians saw cats as magical, gentle, and wise. Imagine the stillness of an Egyptian temple, where stone pillars rise like trees and warm desert wind whispers across the sand. A cat walks silently across the stone floor, its paws soft against the carved symbols of eternity. Priests watch in reverence. Children offer food to these sacred animals. Some cats are even mummified, honored in the same way as noble humans. To harm a cat was to risk punishment, even death. Greek travelers and Roman historians wrote of these Egyptian customs with a mix of awe and confusion. When Greek influence spread through Egypt and later Rome took control, cats began to journey farther west. Romans admired their grace and usefulness. Cats were protectors of food supplies, companions in households, and even mascots aboard ships. In frescoes and pottery, we see their forms, stretching, stalking, curled beneath the feet of philosophers and poets. But admiration did not always mean reverence. As the Roman Empire grew tired and began to fracture, the old gods, including Bastet and her kin, lost favor. When Christianity spread across the empire, it brought a new worldview, one that did not always make room for the mystical middle ground cats represented. They were not entirely tame, yet not wild, not entirely good, yet not evil. And so the stage was quietly set for suspicion to take root. In the next chapter, we'll walk into the flickering candlelight of early medieval Europe and see how these elegant creatures began to shift from sacred to suspicious. We now find ourselves at the dawn of a new chapter in European history, the early Middle Ages, a time between the fall of Rome and the rise of kingdoms. It was a quiet, uncertain world. Much of the old order had vanished, and with it, the protection of ancient temples and libraries. The Roman roads still cut through the land, but grass grew between the stones. The old cities crumbled, and in their place rose small villages and manors, each centered around a church or a castle. Christianity had spread, and it offered hope, structure, meaning, and guidance. But it also brought a new way of seeing the world. Where once gods and spirits filled the air, now angels and demons danced between heaven and earth. And into this new world, this world of saints and sin, stepped the cat. In the eyes of the church, all things were either of God or of the devil. There was little room for ambiguity. Cats, who walked silently, slept all day, and wandered at night, began to raise questions. They were unlike dogs, who obeyed, served, and guarded. Cats obeyed no one. They crept through monasteries, slipped into homes, and stared at people with eyes that seemed to reflect firelight. In many Christian writings of the time, the natural world was seen as a book written by God, full of signs and meanings. Birds, storms, rivers, and even animals were symbols, lessons to be interpreted. And the cat? It was difficult to read. It did not serve. It did not toil. It lounged. It watched. It knew something. But what? Priests began to speak of cats with suspicion. Some early texts referred to them as creatures of pride. Others hinted at darker connections, linking cats with paganism, with women, and with the mysterious forces that Christianity sought to purge. Even among villagers, tales began to stir. Stories of cats sneaking into churches, cats watching with unblinking eyes during baptisms or funerals. A black cat sitting on a fence during a storm became a bad omen. A cat crossing a road at night, a sign to turn back. Superstition at this stage was not yet hysteria, but it was quietly growing, and the cat, once a symbol of grace and balance, began to transform in the collective imagination. Superstition does not often shout, it whispers, and in the villages and quiet corners of medieval Europe, those whispers grew louder with every passing generation. In a world without science to explain the unknown, people turned to stories, to folklore, to old beliefs, and to the quiet power of the spoken word. A sick child, a failed harvest, a storm that struck only one house. Each mystery demanded an answer, and sometimes the answer wore fur and watched from the shadows. Cats were close at hand, and yet never entirely knowable. A farmer might wake to find his grain spoiled and recall the way his neighbor's cat stared at him the day before. A mother might fall ill, and someone might whisper that the cat who always sat by her door had cursed her. These small moments, these murmurs accumulated. Village storytellers passed down tales of cats who vanished and reappeared, who walked between homes and never aged. Old women who lived alone with cats were watched carefully. A single misfortune could bring accusation. Children were told not to touch a black cat, lest bad luck follow. Some households left offerings to appease the cat spirit. Others shut their doors tight at night. The line between pet and omen blurred. In church sermons, metaphors grew sharper. The proud cat became a warning. The sneaky cat, a devil in disguise. As literacy spread slowly and books were copied by hand in monasteries, images of cats appeared not as companions, but as symbols of deceit. Marginal drawings in illuminated manuscripts showed cats dancing, playing tricks, or attending witches. And so the myth built itself, stone by stone, whisper by whisper. Cats, who had done nothing but live their silent, graceful lives, were painted into the background of fear. But this was only the beginning. In the chapters to come, we will walk deeper into the forest of medieval fear, into the time of witch trials and holy decrees, where superstition took on the voice of authority, and where the cat was hunted not only by rumor, but by law. As we step deeper into the medieval shadows, we arrive at a time when fear took on a new shape, a time of whispers, accusations, and fire. This is the age of witchcraft. Between the 14th and 17th centuries, Europe was swept up in a series of moral panics. People feared witches walked among them, unseen, plotting, cursing, poisoning wells, and stirring storms. In truth, they were often simply midwives, herbalists, or widows who lived alone. And always, somewhere close, there was a cat. Black ones were feared most. Their dark coats blended with the night. Their eyes gleamed in the firelight. Their movements were too silent, their habits too mysterious. To the medieval mind, the connection seemed obvious. Cats were said to be the witch's familiar, an animal servant or spiritual companion. Some said they drank blood. Others claimed they whispered spells. In some tales, witches could even transform into cats to sneak undetected through windows and doors. Old trial records, handwritten in fading ink, contain accusations like these. She had a black cat who followed her everywhere. The cat jumped through the fire and vanished. The cat cried out when the woman was whipped. In 1233, Pope Gregory IX issued a papal bull called Vox in Rama, which officially associated black cats with devil worship. In it, he described sinister rituals involving toads, cats, and demons. It was not just a religious opinion, it was a decree. This church-backed fear spread quickly. Inquisitors and local priests began to view the presence of cats in a home as potential proof of heresy. During the witch hunts, women were tortured into confessing they kept demon-possessed animals. Cats were seized, burned, drowned, or hung alongside their owners. A creature who had once curled by the fire was now seen as a shadow of Satan. In some towns, festivals even featured mass killings of cats, thrown from towers or set alight in the square. And yet, in quiet corners, some still kept their cats. Old grandmothers still left a bowl of milk at the door. Children still whispered to sleeping kittens. Because beneath the fear, love lingered. This chapter of history is not easy to tell. It is full of injustice and sorrow. But even here, the cat endured, not because it was strong, but because it was quiet, patient, persistent. In our next chapter, we will explore the plague. It began quietly, like many horrors do, a whisper from the east, a merchant ship docking with its crew already ill, a single rat in a cart of grain. By the mid-14th century, Europe was in the grip of a disaster so vast, so incomprehensible, that entire villages vanished. The Black Death, a plague caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, spread like wildfire. Fleas riding on rats carried it from town to town. But those rats had few natural enemies left. For decades, Europe had declared war on cats. In the name of religion, of superstition, of fear, people had slaughtered them by the thousands. Cats, especially black ones, had been blamed for witchcraft, for curses, for sin, but never, strangely enough, for rats. And so, with the cat population decimated, rats roamed freely. They burrowed into granaries, scampered through alleyways, and brought their tiny passengers with them. The fleas bit rats, then they bit humans, and people began to die. Within just a few years, as many as 25 million people, nearly one-third of Europe's population, were gone. The sick were covered in boils, their breath was labored, their skin turned dark. Entire families vanished within days. Church bells rang constantly, and carts carried away bodies. And still, many believed the plague was caused by evil, by sin, by witches, by God's punishment. Few saw the rats. Fewer still realized the cats were missing. In some corners, the irony became bitterly clear. As rats multiplied, a few wise souls began to protect cats again. Some monasteries welcomed them back. Farmers quietly encouraged them to stay near barns. And slowly, ever so slowly, the tide began to turn. The plague still raged, but cats, once hunted, were now seen again as useful, as protectors. Not all were welcomed, of course. Superstition never dies all at once. But here, in the wake of devastation, something shifted. The cat, long maligned, began its quiet return. In the next chapter, we will follow this slow return to grace, and the Enlightenment's role in reshaping how the world saw the creatures of night, shadow, and independence. The Enlightenment was not born in a single moment, nor in a single mind. It rose gently, like morning mist over a quiet village, slow, soft, persistent. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe began to look at the world with new eyes, eyes that questioned, measured, studied. The age of superstition was not over, but it now had company. The age of reason had begun. Philosophers wrote treatises, scientists charted the stars, doctors sought causes instead of curses, and slowly even the most maligned animals were reconsidered. The cat, who had endured centuries of fear, began to return not only to barns and alleyways, but to favor. Writers described them as elegant, curious, clever. Painters captured their beauty, lounging in sunbeams, perched on windowsills. In France, Voltaire wrote of cats with admiration. In England, poets described them not as omens, but companions. No longer symbols of the devil, they were seen once more as creatures of comfort, purring beside philosophers, curling near candlelight. Yet even now, the cat remained a paradox. It was never fully tamed, never fully domesticated. It lived beside humans, but never quite for them. And perhaps that is why it has survived, not in spite of its mystery, but because of it. As the Enlightenment gave way to the modern world, the cat's image shifted further. In Victorian homes, it became a symbol of gentility. In urban alleys, a symbol of independence. Children kept them as pets, writers praised their poise, and scientists acknowledged their role in keeping disease at bay. Still, the stories lingered. Black cats on Halloween, superstitions about luck and omens. Even as the world grew brighter, a small shadow of the past followed behind, and the cat, quiet, graceful, unchanged, walked softly at its edge. In our final chapter, we will step back from the dates and doctrines. We'll share gentle stories, folk tales, and legends that speak to the lasting image of the cat, the sleepy, silent figure that once walked through fire and kept walking still. And now, dear listener, let us leave the roads of history behind. Let us settle by a hearth where the fire is low and the tea is warm. In this final chapter, we will listen, not to facts, but to stories. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, carried in baskets and letters, whispered in dreams. These are the tales of cats, not evil, not divine, but simply themselves. In the village of Thistlebrook, they say an old widow lived on the edge of the forest. She had no family, but she had a cat named Bramble. Every morning, Bramble would walk the stone path to the baker's door. He would sit, silent as a statue, until a roll was tossed down to him. Then, with great dignity, he would return home. When the widow passed, some say the cat never left the cottage. He sat in the windowsill, waiting, and on quiet mornings when the dew is thick, villagers claim you can still see paw prints on the path. In another tale, from the hills of Lombardy, a monastery kept a gray tabby who was said to have never missed a prayer. At dawn, as the bells rang, he would appear, gliding through the hall, leaping onto a pillar, and watching the monks in silence. When he passed, the abbot had him buried in the garden, beneath the rosemary. The monks said he brought them luck, but they never replaced him. And in the misty coastlands of Brittany, it is said that black cats can see the souls of the dead, not out of malice, but so they can guard them. They walk the cliffs at night, tails high, escorting spirits gently to their rest. Old sailors, before leaving port, would always nod to the cat by the dock, a silent plea for safe passage. Each of these stories, quiet, gentle, full of mystery, remind us that cats are not evil, nor are they saints. They are something else, something still, a flicker in the night, a shadow in the corner, a warm presence by your feet as you drift to sleep. You have traveled through temples and trials, through plagues and paintings, through whispers and wonder. You've heard how fear can shape a creature's story, and how that creature can outlive the fear. The cat, once feared and burned, now lives in our homes, our books, our dreams. So as you settle into stillness, remember this: the cat walks through history as it walks through a room, quiet, graceful, unseen until it chooses to be known. May your rest be peaceful, your dreams soft, and if a black cat crosses your path tonight, perhaps it is only watching over you. Good night from the sleepless historian. Sleep well.